to do, and I'll maybe touch on this as we go through the presentation, part of what we were trying to do with the campus is sort of blurring boundaries between the physical and the digital space, really create an environment that was really future facing and can adapt to circumstances need. I'll also apologise at the start. I'll probably be a little bit rusty. I've done numerous presentations on this. I've done numerous tours of the campus as well, and I really enjoy doing it and showing it off. But as I've said, you know, since March, most of my focus has been on how do we deliver on the digital space and not the physical space. But I guess I was invited here today to talk about the award that we got as a Campus in the Future, which seems a long time ago. I think this was last November that this was awarded, and initially I was up to talk about in March when this was all fresh in my mind. What I would want to do, I think initially when I spoke to Jill about this, we were going to start off with the video that we submitted as the Campus of the Future, our submission to the Green Gowns Awards. We created a little video for it. So I've embedded this into this slide, and I can start with that. Hopefully, it's only music in the background, so hopefully you'll get a sense, and that'll give you, I think, a bit of a context and give you some ideas of what we were doing. So I don't know if you can hear or not. Okay, that'll give you a little bit of a taster in the background, but the project really started what we would call the Hamilton Challenge. That was our original Hamilton campus. So the new UWS is a multi-campus university with campuses in Paisley, Hamilton, Ayr, Dumfries, and also one in London. UWS came into formation in 2007 and was a merger, and the Hamilton end was a merger with Bell College. So that was in an original Bell College building. That's where I actually started the UWS in Bell College, and I could probably see my office from here. So that was a challenge. We had an inefficient building, outdated, riddled with asbestos, built in 1972, and just really unfit for purpose, and where the university wanted to see its future in terms of learning and teaching, but also for its sustainability aspects of it as well. So the university went through an options appraisal, and it came to three sort of options that were put on the table. They went through a long period of appraising these, and they did the scaling and all that. I wasn't part of that. I'm not really familiar how they do. I believe at the end point there was it was equal between Hamilton International Park and Eurocentral, but these were the three options that we're looking at: a redevelopment of the existing site, or moving outside the centre of Hamilton, either to still in South Lanarkshire at Hamilton International Park, or slightly more controversial, moving away to Eurocentral, into one of the units at Eurocentral, which was in North Lanarkshire. So there was lots of politics involved in this decision as well. But key throughout this options appraisal was universities saw this as an opportunity to do something different, an opportunity starting from a blank canvas to create something that was really future facing and more, as you'll see as we go through, something that can adapt and change, particularly as learning adapt. So the decision was significantly informed by the views of students, how they saw the learning in the future, by colleagues and by staff and by external stakeholders. And obviously an important part of that decision-making process was the environmental assessment and the ambition to create that idea of a carbon neutral campus. So all these factors fed into that. And the conclusion to that process that moving away from our original site and into to the site at Hamilton International Park was the best. It encompassed the most modern building materials and architectural design possible, will enable UWS to create a facility that was both sustainable and inspiring for those working and studying. All sites had the potential to create inspirational environments, but the Hamilton International Park site was the winner in that particular respect. And particularly, UWS has set itself sustainability targets, and particularly in its 2020 strategy, it had a target to deliver net zero carbon emissions by 2040. So again, this fed into the decision about how to relocate to the Hamilton International Park. And another reason, and I've done a number of presentations on this sort of aspect of it, it was repurposing an existing building. So it's seen again as that sustainable use, sustainable solution, because you were an adaptive reuse of an existing building. The building that we moved into, the Eco Campus as it was called, in Hamilton International Park, was initially designed as office accommodation, and was built to shell and core in 2012, but never occupied. So you'll see the three buildings on that slide there. I was going to point it at there, but you'll not see my hand. What UWS did was build this, we joined them together, we wanted one campus together, so we added on that street, but the three buildings were initially the same. So, choosing existing buildings for adaptive reuse, we saw, our university saw as a significantly more sustainable solution than a new build. And particularly, it gave us a blank canvas. There was sitting at shell and core, so we were able to adapt and fit out the buildings to meet the needs of a modern university. Particularly, this is where I came into play, and it was like a kid in a sweetie shop with me, with that blank canvas. A flexible design with campus ensures that we'll be best place for future adaptations. We've got really flexible space, and we can change and adapt. And I frequently tell a story. When I was seconded onto the position, when I went for the interview, one of the questions I was asked was, what will the campus look like in 30 years? So that was very much part of our thought process of how we were developing it, really something that can change and adapt to continually meet the needs of changing learning and how learning will change. Construction began in October 2016. This is probably another good reason to repurpose existing buildings, and we opened in September 2018. So students were first taught in the building actually in August 2018, but the main body of students came in September 2018. So it was a really rapid project. It was hard work, but it was actually great to be involved. And it was a £110 million investment. We have around about 4,100 registered students at the campus, roughly 208 staff, and we have 26,000 metres of flexible space. So that's the whole one. Interestingly, it looks a lot smaller than the old campus, but it's the same amount of space. It's just used completely differently. So I'll give you a little bit of background in terms of the vision. The vision was very much the idea of agile learning. So we were trying to create a campus where every space could be seen as a learning space, and also the idea of agile working, that every space is a workspace. So we have no offices on this campus at all. So all staff, in particular for academics and for universities, we see this as a major shift. So all staff are co-located in one of the buildings. So again, it was trying to create this. We did have plans for full agile working, but we didn't get that. So it's more about a shared office space where staff have a fixed space. But really behind that was to look at modern teaching spaces, that move away from traditional lecture layouts to more fluid, open plan spaces. So the integration of innovative technology was important, because we saw that as a way in which we can be at the forefront of developments in higher education pedagogy. So even before COVID, we were starting to think about that. Spaces on the campus are very, very flexible. We can support different purposes, can be reallocated and reconfigured. They're designed to scale up and adapt to various class sizes. We've got semi-enclosed environments, retractable walls, breakout spaces, and technology solutions where we can video conference and screencast and link up all the spaces across campuses. So small spaces can increase in size. So the technology, we see that the technology has been cutting edge, or leading edge, bleeding edge, I think some people call it, is integral to the physical spaces where students can learn and socialise. That's staff and students, we should say, because we find since we've opened the campus, more staff are working in places across the whole campus rather than at their allocated desk. We see lots of movement, or we did before March. So every learning space, lots of spaces, wireless presentation systems where we can share content. That idea of collaborative learning is very much important. We have technology where that can happen. The entire learning environment is monitored and managed and scheduled by a cloud management system. So we can provide instant room availability information, ability to book spaces using an online booker system. And there's tablets situated at the end of the learning spaces where we can see what space is being used and what's not. So the spaces are throughout the whole campus, technology enabled, optimized for ease of use, smart lighting systems, charging outlets across, flooded with charging outlets. We thought we'd flooded the place with it, but one of the early demands from students was, can we have more? And what we found, the most popular spaces are the ones where plugs and charging are. So across the campus, you group work, pods, screens, sharing information, but it's very much about allowing the staff and students to work in a space and in a way that best meets their needs. So that's around about the idea of flexibility. But right and more important is about creating spaces to inspire student success. So very much the thought process and what I brought to the table was, we need to be using the evidence where students have the opportunity to work, collaborate, to share experience, to interact with each other. That promotes better, more successful learning. Sustainability credentials, I was on my strength here talking about spaces, a wee bit weaker here talking about sustainability credentials, but that's very much part of it. And some of you'll have seen some of the aspects in the video, but again, this is moving into an eco-campus, so a lot of these facilities were already there. So all energy to the campus is provided by renewable energy, the Blantyre wind farm, with the majority supplied by local wind turbines through a financial power purchase agreement. Building and achievement, I've got notes here that was given to me by States, an impressive EPC rating, which you'll probably be able to see. To me, if that's good, it means nothing to me. But taking account renewable energy, efficient lighting, heating, and insulation. The building management system ensures a high level of controllability, and in fact, we spent the first year tweaking it to get the levels right. I think we had to reduce the lighting by about 60%. It's interesting now when when you test the fire alarms and the lights go back up to the maximum. That's what it was like the first weeks. But we originally kept bringing the levels down, tweaking the lighting levels, switching and heating and cooling in the areas. It's got a very innovative cooling and system for heating and air conditioning, where it's censored because we don't know where people will be at particular points. So we could have 200 people in a space 1 minute for 2 hours, and then the rest of the day that can be empty. So that it's censored so it can switch off in that respect. We have a rainwater harvesting system, which 89% of the water needs come from that. So it runs off the roof to feed the toilets and that. We have a fleet of electric vehicles with electric charging points, and we were given funding from Scottish Cycling to create a secure cycle compound, and First Bus launched 2 new bus services, UWS branded buses. That was one of our concerns around moving out of campus and balancing off. We have a building which has 1,000 car parking spaces, so balancing off, moving out the centre of town with 1,000 car parking spaces, but still trying to meet our environmental and sustainability credentials. So the different ways in which people can get to the campus is vitally important. And First Bus took a punt on us and launched 2 new bus services from Hamilton and one from East Kilbride that came into the campus, along with the existing. The majority of the old Hamilton campus furniture was sold to charity or reuse, and we're actually using some of that, and the best of that, in our other campuses. We've won a number of awards. We won the Green Gown Awards, shortlisted for a Climate Neutral Herald Pioneer Awards, and it was also the winner of the Glasgow University Sustainabilities that Inspire. And I think that what we see from it, we're more proud of it because it's about the whole package. It's not just about the architecture, it's about everything. It's about the vision, the spaces, and the sustainability. And that's a little quote from our principal, how, particularly I think he was a key driver in this project, but saw it as being highly ambitious. And, winning awards is important for him because it can mark the success. But I thought we'd just finish off. That's okay hearing from the principal. I think it's important to hear from our most important users, and that's our students. We are still in a process of post-occupancy evaluation. We had phased it. We completed phase 1. We were completing a report on phase 2 just as lockdown happened, but we thought we'd take a 3 to 5 year post-occupancy evaluation. So this is sort of reports from the students. And these are some quotes from students who I think, just a couple to finish off, because I think they are our most important users. We like this one. It's not as intimidating as other universities, because we would like to hope that students feel part of it. It's their campus, they own the spaces, that idea of a shared ownership. They don't have to stand and wait to be asked in, they become part of it. So we are definitely, I like that one. What we found, and this is interesting, that staff were resistant to teach in open areas, but students got it right away. They were more comfortable learning in open areas, and they thought that prepared them better for the workspace. They were saying, in the workspace, I'll be working in an open area, I'll be working alongside colleagues, I won't be stuck in an office anymore. So students took to the open areas and saw the benefit of that. Staff were a little bit resistant, but change in higher education is like a tanker. It's a very slow process. And I'll just finish, I use this slide a lot. Quotes from the students, there weren't the 2 students are on that, but the idea about, the placemates to want to learn and so many places to study in comfort. And if you are thinking of projects on this, beanbags and hammocks, students love them. But that's me, and I will hopefully might be able to answer any questions that you have.
That's great. Thanks very much for that. On reflections on improvements to the design and construction stage of the recent NPD college project, It's based on the lessons learned from the development of the city centre campus at City of Glasgow College's new centre, and will be presented by Fergal Macaulay, Head of Facilities Management, and Les Patterson, Head of Estates Management of City of Glasgow. So over to you guys.
Morning, everyone. Obviously, you can see I'm wearing a shirt and tie, so believe me, I'm on site today. I'd be a bit sad if I was sitting in the kitchen with my mask and all that kitted out. So no, thanks for inviting us along to provide this presentation. So Les Patterson is more involved with the day-to-day MPD contract, but both of us were involved with the design construction stage. So we'll just take you through our experience of MPD and where we think there could be improvements. So I'll do the first few slides. Les will finish off with his slides. Questions at the end. We've also got a 3-minute fly through video. If you want to see it at the end, I can put that up. You can let me know. Okay, so project overview. So City of Glasgow College was through the merger of 3 Glasgow colleges in 2010. So it was Central College Glasgow, Glasgow College of Nautical Studies, and Glasgow Metropolitan College. Back then we had 11 buildings over about 7 sites. The condition varied. They were probably around about condition C, C minus. The spaces lacked flexibility for the curriculum. So we were constantly spending money, backlog maintenance, trying to adapt, the sites. So it made sense that, through the merger, coming together, and to change culture as well, to create 2 new sites, totaling 68,000 square meters. So that was to allow us to deliver the sums then, now it's credits. So the only funding model back then was the non-profit distributing model. Obviously through recessions and, the government not having the capital monies, that was our only option. So we were successful in going through that, working with SFT. So the non-profit distribution model, basically it was developed to replace the traditional PFI. And just, again, it's just an alternative funding source for government. So there was 3 educational projects. So City of Glasgow College, you'll see there, 223 million. And there was 2 smaller ones, Ayrshire College and Burness College. Now, I had a look before the presentation just to see, obviously I realised that MPD is no longer in use. So just wanted to see what else was out there. So just for anyone who is looking, if you're looking for capital funding or you're looking at new build sites, there's a new one I call MIM. Now MIM is it's a mutual investment model. It's a Welsh model. You can have a look at the presentation shared. You can see the source at the bottom, but it's quite interesting because it's taking lessons learned from PFI and MPD, and it talks about heavier resource, more engagement, because at the end of the day, once the building and the site is delivered, you've got to live with it for 25 years. So you want to get it right from the start. So if the presentation shared, you can read into that. So basically, for the college, and obviously to deliver, what we had to do was liaise with all the stakeholders. So in other words, what is it they actually need? So it's always a good idea that if you're going to meet someone, for example, a catering department, if they wanted a new teaching kitchen, it's good to have the meeting in the kitchen so that you can get a good understanding of what they actually need, so that the architects can develop the architecture and data sheet. What do they need in terms of ICT? What size does the room need to be? What layout? Where are the sinks? And also identify, is there any equipment there that we could potentially retain? And that's how we put that down as migration. So there was obviously a process as well through that. But it's important that the stakeholders understand space, because sometimes you look at a floor plan, they may sign it off, but in our experience, when they moved into new buildings, again, it wasn't what they were expecting. So it's very important that, again, can't stress how important it is that you go to the teaching space that you're going to replicate and explain if it's going to be smaller, if it's going to be bigger, just make it very, very clear, just so that there's no kind of complaints at the end of the process that this is not what they were expecting, and also make sure that they actually consult with their staff, because it tends to be the head of department or head of school. And what we found is majority of them did communicate, but there were a few pockets where they didn't. So when staff moved into the new building, there was some complaints about, where's such and such, and there's some equipment missing. So that stage is very, very important. Dialogue with preferred bidders. So obviously once the concept design is completed, all your data sheets are developed. That's all given to all the bidders. So what they come back with is contractors' proposals against the college requirements. So college requirements, in essence, what do the college need? What do they need to be delivered? So it whittled down to 3 preferred bidders. So it's just important to ensure the right people are involved, because again, as I say, 25-year project. If you don't get it right, there's no comeback. Time is of essence. You can't spend too much time reviewing. It could be, obviously Les and myself, we were still very much operational at the time with our old buildings, but trying to get the time to review all the proposals sent in from contractors, it was very, very time consuming. So it would be useful in future. And I know the mutual investment model allows for that you have dedicated resource. Because again, consequences for 25 years. I'll give you an example. Our Riverside campus was delivered in 2015, and we noticed that the water fountains didn't have a drain. Now, for anyone who manages an estate, you can understand the hassle you'll have with that. Water dripping on the floor, students running the water, overflowing the drip tray. So what we did was we asked the contractor, could they change it for City Campus, which was going to be delivered the year after, but the costs were just prohibitive to make that change because the construction phase was well underway. So unfortunately, we're going to have to live it for the next 23 years, unfortunately. It is a very difficult and costly kind of, not really, I wouldn't say it was a mistake, it's just an oversight. You would just expect a designer, an engineer to actually design that in, because obviously when you look at a water fountain, it's recommended to fit it with a drain. So it's just something to bear in mind. The other thing as well is the difficulty we found was when we went out with our requirements and contractor came back with their proposals, you couldn't really comment on quality. It either complies or it doesn't. So it's a bit like going to say you need a college vehicle, and you just said you need a vehicle take you're going to drive 140 miles a week. You could get one bidder giving you a Porsche and one giving you a Lada. At the end of the day, the 3 of them comply because you asked for a car that would take you that distance. You can't comment on the quality, which we found quite frustrating. So it's just something to bear in mind. Migration. I was migration lead for this project. I probably lost 2 years of my life. It was very, very difficult, very new to me. Parts of that where we had an Allen Glen campus with 140 staff and about 50 classrooms. So we had to work with the contractor to build temporary teaching accommodation on site. It provided about 30 classrooms. Within the existing estate, I had to find 20 classrooms. So it was moving the curriculum around just to free up space, and also moving 140 staff out. Other process of migration was group free equipment. So that was equipment that we owned and we wanted to take with us. And again, it was going through asbestos surveys for older equipment and making sure what we were taking across was fit for purpose. Cooking equipment that had gas flame failure valves, and nothing was taken across that failed. So there was different categories of condition. I know in the last presentation, Gilbert, you'd asked about papers. So we had a huge exercise. In the new build, staff were told they were going to get 2 shelves and 1 locker. So we went down all the curriculum areas, and we did find libraries upon libraries of paper. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff come back to 1970s. Staff telling us we need this, we use this for teaching. So through a digitization process, so we brought in a company that actually sat in our basement for about a full year, and they managed to digitize about must have been about, we'd archives in the basement, 2,000 archive boxes, and probably treble that for the details the staff had. So we sent all that back to them, and we ended up migrating probably about 100 archive boxes, and staff did keep the 2 shelves, so it was a success. The other things of migration, which was something that had to be managed closely, was moving sensitive materials. So there was a kind of sign-off period of, when it left the room, it had to be signed. When it was in transit, it had to be 2 people. And then when it got to its destination, it had to be signed by the client. Because again, we've got international students. We've got their passports when they arrive into the United Kingdom. It's just for British border control. There's legal documents, etc. And probably the biggest challenge was, moving 1,400 staff to new buildings. So what I'll do is I'll pass you over to Les. He'll go through other aspects of soft landings and the actual contract itself.
Hello, my name's Leslie Patterson. Thanks for the introduction, Fergal. Fergal started off saying that he wasn't in his kitchen. Well, can I show you that I am in my kitchen? Handover and soft landings. The purpose of soft landings, for those of you, well, as far as a college perspective, is to really engage staff and to excite staff about moving into the building, and finally to enable staff that when they get into the building, they're able to undertake teaching from day one. It was an enormously difficult thing to do. If you speak at City alone, we really stopped teaching in the end of June, and we expected to be back up teaching the beginning of September. That involves moving 1,200 members of staff together with a whole lot of equipment, having them set up, all their personal stuff being moved across as well. It was an enormously challenging thing to do, but it was successfully undertaken. What we attempted to do right from the off was to try to engage staff, and what we were able to do was to create a classroom of the future, and we actually created 4 of these. And what these were we said to them right from a couple of years before we moved into the buildings, right, this is the classroom you're going to get. What do you think of it? And that involved different types of teaching material, different types of furniture, different types of open plan classrooms and the teaching walls, projectors, etc. And that was a driver for change, and that enabled us to really engage with them to see what they wanted. And as a result of some of this, we actually changed the layout of some of the rooms and some of the stuff that was incorporated into the rooms. That we're interested hearing Gordon explain earlier. They have open plan classrooms as well, and we created open plan classrooms as well. And similar to what they've experienced at the University of West of Scotland, is that lecturing staff don't particularly like them. But it is a useful thing for students to undertake. Before people moved into the building, we arranged site visits for all staff several months beforehand, and that was an enormously challenging thing to do. So all 1,400 members of staff were invited into the building in groups of, I think it was about 12. This took months and months to do, but it enabled them to really get a buy-in to the building. They were able to see what their office accommodation was like. There was enormous reluctance in open plan offices when it was first talked about, because people came from small offices of maybe groups of 4 or 5, and they couldn't imagine it. But when they actually went in and they saw what they were given, they were given a desk, they were given a private storage area, they were given access to a pantry with a microwave and dishwasher, it brought people around. Training and equipment, there was an awful lot of new equipment that was purchased, and part of the soft landings was that people came into the building and they were able to know how to use such equipment. So there was all the different bits of equipment. We arranged a training regime before the beginning of term, and that involved, it could involve 20 minutes for how a staff member could work a woodworking machine. To the most extreme example was that we have a TV studio, and that involved a week of solid training for the staff on how to use all the dimmers and all the fancy recording equipment. The handover date was it was all a big push, as these things inevitably are. However, we got there. We got there eventually. I think it ran a week late, which was no mean feat in itself. What we attempted to do was to create a building user guide, so that from day one that people were supported, particularly from the estates functions. So the estate function knew how to operate the fire alarm, how the emergency lighting system worked, how the fire sprinkler system worked, how it could be isolated. And that was an important thing. And that is actually updated on an annual basis through the contracts. So generally, the soft landings, the conclusion was that soft landings went well. We produced welcome packs, and together with the escorts into the buildings, it was a positive thing to do. Contract management. My job now is to manage the NPD contract. I think the initial thought was that we don't need people to manage the buildings, etc., because you have an FM contractor and as part of the service agreement. But that is further from the truth. Could not be. We have it's quite an onerous thing to manage the contract. There's a whole lot of performance standards. I think there's something like 68 in total, and these cover things like health and safety, quality management, contingency planning, performance monitoring, and maintenance. There's a whole lot of stuff that has to be monitored on a daily basis, and that's where my focus is on, to make sure that we pay this enormous annual sum for the maintenance of the building, and to make sure that we get value for money for it. Partnership approach. I've always taken a partnership approach with our FM provider, where at all possible. Payment, for those of you who don't know, that's the, if you like, for the better word, it's the penalties that we impose on the contractor for not meeting the performance standards, and that involves on a monthly basis going through the different jobs that they failed to, for instance, rectify on time, and take deductions on that as well. There is, according to the contracts, there's warning notices. So if they come across if they fail to meet a percentage of their annual service fee, then it gets escalated, and they get warning notice, which can ultimately result in termination of the contract. PPM and life cycle is an important aspect as well. The planned maintenance, they are duty bound to undertake planned maintenance, and there's thousands of planned maintenance activities, hundreds per month, and we monitor these as well. The life cycle of the project, the sums lie with the project's GLQ, who manage the project for funding the project over a 25-year life cycle. So the idea is that there's a life cycle fund in there. It gets spent over the period, and at the end of the 25-year period, the buildings get returned to the college, and they are in a good condition. Utilities. Similar to what Gordon was saying earlier, we have a lot of renewable technologies. We have solar PV, solar thermal, combined heat and power, and rainwater harvesting. We also have vehicle charging points, secure cycle storage. We have electric charging points for bicycles as well. And we also do chemical-free cleaning as well. The biodiesel selected for the combined heat and power plant did not prove economically viable, so unfortunately we've had to turn it off. Part of the performance standards that I mentioned in the last slide was a joint utilities was a partnership approach and performance standards. Part of this is a joint utilities working group we have with FES. So basically, I think it's on a quarterly basis. We sit down to see what what we can do to improve the efficiencies of the college. So in other words, when we do that, we look at consumption and the trends over what was expected in the design of the building, and also compared to the previous year. We have our energy saving programs, which we look at as well. And we look at the building management system, which they run, heating and cooling set points, together with things like what we can do to reduce consumption going forward. There's a statement that says the contract should have been set up in a way that puts more onus on the FM contractor to ensure efficiencies in terms of utility consumptions. There's a clear limit of responsibilities here in terms of the supply of utilities to the campus. So, for instance, the gas or the electricity, the FM contractor is not held responsible for that. But when it comes within the building, the FM contractor is responsible for ensuring the continuity of the supplies. So, for instance, if there was power off the national grid, then the college could not penalise the contractor for doing so. But if there was a problem with a distribution board within the college, well, then it would be the college's responsibility, the FES's responsibility to rectify. There is a performance standard that says that the FES or the FM provider must operate efficiently, and they must take this into consideration during the life cycle of the project. So, for instance, if they were to replace a boiler plant, the college would be entitled, and we would expect the FM provider to undertake an evaluation of what boiler is more economic. So, in summary, I would go further than to say the buildings are certainly much better than legacy buildings. There is absolutely no comparison with them. The previous buildings were leaky. They were totally unfit for purpose in terms of trying to teach modern languages. We have state-of-the-art facilities now, such as a TV and radio room, which is in demand by the likes of BBC and STV. We have a whole range of specialist workshops, and we have food and hospitality kitchens. I think we have about 14 of them, which are really just fantastic. It's important to ensure the design and operational stages are well resourced. We can't emphasise how much it was and how much this project involved in planning and getting people on board about the design. The way it worked is we engaged in every single faculty had input into the design of their workstations. Virgo mentioned this earlier. So, and each individual workspace was produced a floor plan indicating what was where and what equipment wasn't involved in it. And it's clear that when you've moved into the buildings, the faculties that spent more time doing this have reaped the benefits. The faculties who thought this was two, 3 years away, didn't have time to do it. They're the faculties who, when they've moved into the building, have come across difficulties with what was put in. Spend time in soft landings. I think it's very important to get people involved in the project and to ensure that when people come into the building, they're able to operate from day one. The building user guide and O&M manuals. The O&M manuals produced with the building were, to be honest with you, not particularly good. And if I was to reflect upon this, I would have been a lot more demanding on them at the time. And the utilities, I think there's no incentive for the FM contractor to ensure that that they minimise the use of consumption, and I think that is maybe a necessary evil in the NPD contract. That really concludes what I have to say. I think me and Fergal will be delighted to take any questions.
That's great. Thanks very much, Fergal and Les. It was a really good presentation and lots of points for consideration. If I can then just open it up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to raise?
Could I just ask a question on the CHP biodiesel? And I noticed that it's very good of you to admit where there's been mistakes, and I think that's always useful learning experience to learn from mistakes. But I wondered why was it shut down? Was it because the biodiesel just was too expensive or unavailable, or was it technical problems with the product?
Yeah, Gilbert, it's a culmination of things. At City Campus, we were required to purchase 25,000 litres of biodiesel every 2 weeks. Supplier Crown Oil, they couldn't honour that because it's blended from vegetable fat and diesel. They said they wouldn't be able to deliver it. The other thing we found was for every pound we put into CHP, we were getting about 25p back in savings and electricity and heat. So it just didn't make sense. So we were going to spend about nearly £600,000 a year extra to reduce carbon. But then when we looked at the emissions factor of biodiesel is not far off gas. So it just did not make sense whatsoever. So sustainably, yeah, from the financial side and from the environment side, it didn't make much difference. Plus the fact that we had to ship the biodiesel from England, so it had to come up in a tanker. So again, when you add the carbon from deliveries, it just didn't make financial sense. But going back to college requirements, we had asked for a kind of renewable technology like biomass, gas turbine, biodiesel. So we gave the options. And their proposal was biodiesel. So it ticked the BREEAM box, it ticked the college requirement box, and that was what's delivered. And if someone had done a desktop study, they would have known straight away that it's not going to work. Plus, the other thing we found is the diesel, HMRC wouldn't give us VAT relief on it because they didn't recognise it as a heating fuel. So again, we were rather than 5% VAT, we were 20% VAT. And even with the renewable obligation certificates, we were only getting 40p a litre off. So it was basically costing us, it was about 90 pence a litre, add your 20%, and then take 40p off. It was still too expensive. So that was a culmination of reasons, but it was we probably ran them for about 3 months and just shut them down.
Thanks. Any other questions? Yeah, I'll chip one in if that's all right. Les, thanks very much for the free promotion of the National Energy Framework. I'll send you the cheque in the post. You alluded to the fact that there is an issue with FM providers not focusing on energy conservation because they're not paying the bill. How easy has it been where you've adopted changes to your practices or looked to put in some changes that may result in energy conservation that affects the FM contract? Have they been quite accepting of those, or have you not had any issues?
I think they generally have, to be honest with you. As I say, we have a quarterly meeting with them, and we have a tracker on what we've done over the period in terms of energy consumption. I mean, we moved in there, and if you look about the things we have done, you know, we've reduced heating set points for a time, and we cut back on occupancy levels. I mean, you know, the occupancy levels, so the occupancy times, etc. The way the contract's worded is that they've got to provide a heat at a certain set point through the day, up to core hours, up to 10 o'clock at night. So they're reluctant to turn the heating off a wee bit earlier than that in case they get financially penalised. So but what we can do is what we've liaised with them and said, well, what we'd like you to do is turn the heating off at 8 o'clock at night, and that will it will cool down, you know, come 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and we will not look at taking any financial deductions if places are cold during that time. And likewise, we've done a wee bit in the morning as well. We've pulled it forward likewise. So there is, and they are susceptible to making changes. So they have been forthcoming on that. I would say.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I'm aware some people with the NPD model. I think Little France, the new Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, that was a lot of people were aware of the issues that existed with the FM contractors. So it's good to hear that those are moving forward, and hopefully the MIM model will maybe even see future integration on that. So thanks very much, guys. If we don't have any other further questions, I'm conscious we're running just a little bit behind. What we'll do is we'll switch to the break just now and reconvene at, I'm just checking my time, so I think it's just after 10 past. If we say 20 past 11, give you a chance to take a break from your screens. I'm conscious that normally these events are an opportunity for networking, so this is not a ban on staying at your screen. If you want to stay at your screen and have a chat with members as well, please do feel free, okay? And we'll pick back up again at 20 past 11. Thanks, guys.
Andy,
On you go.
do you want me to play this video? It's 3 minutes just during the break.
Yes,
And
sorry.
if anyone wants to watch it,
Sorry.
they'll see City Campus and Riverside and get an idea of what we delivered.
Yeah.
I'll just play it in the background.
That'd be great. Sorry, Fergal. Thank you.
That's fine.
That's from Andrew Holy. Andrew's from McDonald. He's the lead advisor for the Scottish Government's non-domestic energy efficiency framework project support unit. That's a mouthful in its own right, Andrew. And is supporting the Scottish Government in the development of the framework, which was originally landed in 2015, and has an active lead in the project support unit, which he's had since 2016. And he's helped deliver multiple guaranteed savings from energy performance contracts across health, higher education, local authority estates, ranging from about £500,000 up to 4 million, which is always nice to have, and also reducing carbon in that process as well. Andrew will give us an overview of the new NDE Framework Project Support Unit framework, how you can access it and how you can use that to help meet your carbon management agenda and deliver efficiencies. So over to you, Andrew.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, and thank you for the invite today and everyone's time today. Apologies, I look like a bit like I'm on Mastermind. I've been relegated to the bedroom whilst my son's off nursery, so you'll have to excuse the spotlight on my face. So thanks very much. It's great to be able to speak again today. I have spoken at EAUC events before, and you may have seen similar slides from other projects, but it's just a really great opportunity to give an update on the latest set of non-domestic energy efficiency frameworks from Scottish Government. So as Andy kindly introduced, there's two new frameworks which have now been released under Scottish Government's energy performance contract frameworks. There's projects frameworks for under £1 million and over £1 million projects, which I'll come on to shortly. For those that are not aware, so the non-domestic energy efficiency frameworks were set up by Scottish Futures Trust and Scottish Government, as Andy was saying, about 2015, and there has been a first iteration of the framework between 2016 and 2020, which I'll give a bit of an update on at the end here. It's a framework that's open to the complete public and third sector, obviously including further education and higher education. It really takes an efficiency first approach to projects, buildings projects, infrastructure projects, and is seen to be a continuing, hopefully, success in supporting with the I guess the drive to net zero, and with efficiency being the first drive. It's a relatively low regret in terms of opportunities when we're thinking about decarbonisation of grids, etc., which I'll come on to in a second. Just to give the initial update, so the new frameworks are split into frameworks of contractors, so over £1 million projects where there are 11 framework contractors. So I've got the names of those up on screen. You might be aware of some. Others might be a bit new. Typically those that might not know the names of, people like Asset Plus or Imtech Low Carbon Solutions, and indeed Amoresco. They're sort of energy performance contract specialists, and typically they come from arms of sort of big utilities companies. So Imtech's from EDF, and Asset Plus is actually from Imtech originally. However, quite a range of different contractors, all offering different skill sets. However, the subcontractor books for these entities is completely open, so it's open to the specifics of a project. So in terms of locality or specialisms, that they will draw on other subcontractors to support deliver these projects. The under £1 million framework has also just gone live. It's less, there's less contractors on that framework, and actually 4 of them, so those other than Everwarm, are on the over £1 million as well. Everwarm were on the original framework as well, however, so they are aware of the processes. I guess it's maybe a smaller framework because there might be smaller opportunities, but it's still a relatively competitive market, with all of these entities having delivered NDE framework projects in the past. So going really on about the whole building approach, what we are trying to get at is that these projects, energy performance contracts, do support investment in any form of measures across the estate, following sort of the lean, clean, green approach in respect of an energy hierarchy. But also important is the be seen. So energy performance contracts come with guaranteed savings, which I'll talk about shortly. However, I guess that's an important thing about the metering and monitoring of performance of all the different solutions, and that comes under quite a heavily regulated measurement and verification approach, which underpins the projects and obviously payments. In terms of the first iteration of the framework, we've had about 21 projects come through with a total investment, 19 projects under this. There's 2 more that moved on to the new framework, of about £25 million of investment. As Andy was saying, they do range in scale from £500,000 to 3.8 million. The graphic here just provides sort of a breakdown of where the different technologies have been invested in across the framework to date. Just an idea of some of the entities on the left here of the different public bodies that have used the framework. So it does cover local authorities, NHS, and obviously universities and higher education bodies. Got a couple of case studies at the end. In terms of that whole building approach, what that also means is trying to get a business case that looks holistically across the opportunities for retrofit. Obviously, existing estates will play a big part in future carbon reduction targets. Obviously, new builds are very important, but trying to improve the existing estate is going to be key. And from a financial business case, some measures, such as particularly those associated with gas and low carbon heat, don't have a particularly palatable payback as an individual energy conservation measure. However, if they can be wrapped up, if we can upscale projects, bring in some of the lower payback options, there's the opportunity for the business case and the project to maybe have a sort of more palatable sort of 8 to 12 year payback, simple payback. When we wrap them all together. I guess one of the things we are looking at the moment as well is not just simple payback analysis, but sort of net present value opportunities and also whole lifetime carbon costs, which are new metrics that are becoming more of a consideration now that I guess our finance colleagues are aware of the challenge around carbon and the reputation around carbon. So it's not just simply money savings under these projects, it's also carbon or energy. So why would you use energy performance contracts? So it sort of talks about there that payment is linked to guaranteed savings, and there are different complexities around the different contract forms, which I'm happy to talk about if you want to get in contact with me separately. Not enough time today, but effectively there's different ways in which savings targets, which can be pounds or energy or carbon, tons of carbon, will be linked to the payments paid to contractors. There's a design and build model, and then there's almost a mini PPP, and the design build facility. Do the facilities management and maintenance associated with it. So different opportunities for contracting from specialist contractors. So obviously you showed the contractors there earlier. I guess importantly also there's a lot of standardized processes and documentation. So whilst they can be quite big projects and challenging to look to procure at scale and energy efficiency across lots of buildings at one time, the contracts are standard form. There is a lot of standard form template, tender and detailed specification documents that the framework provides to hopefully streamline development and delivery of the projects. We as the Mont McDonald, our sub-consultants, also provide a £50,000 grant funded support unit to help with project development and delivery, covering project management and advisory and procurement, which I'll touch on in a second. And also there's opportunities for sort of wider funding. So I talked about the DBFM model there, opportunities for third-party finance. The complexities of that are similar to MPD that was talked about by the gentleman earlier. So they are typically bigger projects, because if we're looking at DBFM, you're looking at third-party finance and facilities management aspects and annual service payments. So we are sort of talking sort of 5 million plus really, if you're looking at third-party finance. But from a design and build perspective, there are things like Salix finance loans. Obviously it can be reserve capital, or indeed opportunities like the Scottish Funding Council put out for sort of 0% loans and the likes for these types of projects. We work very closely with those entities. Wary of time today, so I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on programs, but the graphic here just does show that there is a relatively significant time that goes from inception through to delivery of energy performance contract projects, because we are looking at doing them at scale. But there is obviously quite a standardized process to it, and hopefully there is merit in that, in respect of being clear on what's being delivered and very clear monitored savings that we've shown here is typically a year's worth of analytics. And again, we can provide more detail on that if it's of interest. from the project support unit. So I have already touched on this, but as I say, we are here to support you right from inception through to delivered savings on projects, and up to £50,000 grant funding from Scottish Government covering these advisory services. Our consortium is quite large, so we've got quite a lot of sub-consultants to support. Some of the GEP, MABIT and ITP are typically sort of technical advisory support, and in terms of doing energy audits and analytics of tender returns and investment grade proposals. We have EVES, who are a measurement and verification specialist, Tambourine Energy Consultants, who are an energy auditor. We are working with Arbon Co, who are a software developer as much as anything, and do quite a lot around analytics of desktop and energy performance certificates. There's some interesting work that we can be doing there on the digital side, and specialist procurement advisors in S&J as well. I thought just very quickly look at a couple of case studies. So the college's Energy Efficiency Pathfinder, I believe Colin's actually on the line here from Edinburgh College. So Edinburgh were one of 4 colleges that undertook an energy performance contract back in 2016-17. It was a really tight project turnaround. The graphic on the bottom here shows typically the amount of time it takes to deliver a project, and actually how we delivered SEEP, or how the colleges helped deliver SEEP. It was a tight program, but ultimately hopefully a good success at about over 3 million in investment, over 350k in savings across the different colleges, and a real mix of technologies in terms of lighting, combined heat and power, fuel switching, optimization, and there were some renewables, and at West Lothian indeed there was quite a big investment in secondary glazing. So whilst it was a small amount of the savings, it was a big part of their capital spend, and actually the colleges saw about 12 to 40% in annual campus energy cost savings. The larger one being New Battle Abbey College there, that apologies we don't have a graphic on, but that was a movement from oil to gas-fired heating, and an improvement in the efficiency of their heating system. Similarly, we're actually working with University of St Andrews at the moment. So they've got a UCRF project that's being delivered through the framework. Again, substantial savings, and the main metric we were working with there was a £200 per tonne of lifetime carbon, which is really quite challenging. I think that's actually being upped as we think about low carbon heat going forward, but this project's managed to meet it. Really quite, again, a diverse range of measures that have been installed through the project. They're just about to start their savings period, and it's about 30 diverse buildings under one project. So Vital Energy have been the lead for that, and have been the main contractor, drawing on specialist subcontractors. So it's generally been going well. Challenges, and I am aware of time, so I'll wrap up quick, but just we are aware of low carbon heat challenges, and the fact that the grid is decarbonising, so electricity is having less of a factor, and heat is more of a consideration. Unfortunately, utilities cost forecasts are pretty stable, so if you look at a unit of heat based on a heat pump of COP of 3 against 90% gas boiler, really you're going to struggle to get a financial case for heat pumps or the likes over conventional gas boilers, but then it's really looking at that whole building approach and how you can make other savings to still make financial savings in terms of improvements in fabric or lighting replacements. Maybe looking at the business case difference. So is it a whole life carbon savings? Is carbon a new currency that will underpin these types of projects? And separately, we are also looking at partner approaching through the new framework, where effectively, instead of just one tender for one contract with a contractor, the tender stage really looks to procure a partner contractor, where you'd tender an initial package of works, but that might lead to a future program of works over a number of years, where it seemed to be a positive engagement, which should just streamline the process further. So all of this, obviously, we're really happy to provide more detail on. Just appreciate your time today in being able to give a bit of an update on where we are with the framework. And obviously very much welcome any questions that you might have that we